I asked Abbie what it was like to get a telephone call from the writer Malcolm Gladwell for his book Blink. We also discuss her primary teachers, her own teaching, and her thoughts on women in music today. In the course of a normal day, the telephone rings, you answer it, and you hear, "Hi, this is Malcolm Gladwell, and I'd like to interview you."
Oh, yes.
What was that like? Tell me what that was like.
Well, of course, it was a shockaroo and very pleasant. And he is just a blast to talk to. And he just kind of he has this way of just sort of pulling stuff out of you too.
Hmm.
Pretty colorful stuff, you know. So
Uh-huh.
it's sort of stuff that I had, just really hadn't thought about for probably, I don't know, 20 years or something.
Hmm.
And so it was just rollicking fun.
Really? He's such a great
Yes.
writer and such
Yeah.
a smart guy. I mean, I think I would be intimidated talking to him, but he
No,
didn't
no,
seem
no.
that way at all.
He's just very, very amiable and kind and funny and clever. No, he's just very comfortable. Yeah.
I heard that you didn't know that you were in his book until I think a friend of yours heard him speak someplace and he read from his book and she went up and said, "Abby's my friend," or something like that.
Well, I mean, I guess I did know. Let's see, but she didn't know, and she's a librarian, and they were having their like annual huge, librarian wingding or whatever they do in New York, and he was their guest, their special, their guest speaker, and he said he just kind of started to talk about his book, which had just come out, and to a bunch of librarians. Obviously, they were excited, and he said, "Oh, I'm just going to start out telling you a story." And then he started to tell my story, and my friend, very good friend, very close friend, a violist, as well as a librarian, and she just basically plots. I mean, she just couldn't believe it. It was just, she got so excited, and then she went up and bought one of the books and had him, sign it. And he wrote, um, you were my inspiration for the book.
That's great.
So it was really, really neat.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, let's go back. I know you've been teaching years and years at Trossingen, the Musik Hochschule in Trossingen. You
Hmm.
first studied, your main teachers, I think, were Per Breivik, Vladimir Slokar, and Christian Lindberg, and you also studied some with Vinko Globokar, I think. Um,
Yeah, my main teacher, was D. Stewart, actually, in undergrad.
really? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Because I knew
yeah.
him at Indiana. I did some teaching at Indiana.
Oh, he's great. And in high school, I had Dave Sporny, who's also a well-known teacher. And I went to Interlochen Arts Academy. And yeah, so and Carl Hinterbickler I had for 1 year, which was just
Right. Okay.
precious, precious
Uh-huh.
time. But yeah, I had fantastic teachers. Globokar I had for just for a summer
Hmm.
at Siena, Accademia di Chigiana, and Christian Lindbergh, for a couple of boot camps. It was incredibly intense. Is hardly the word.
Yeah. 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 He seems like a very energetic guy, to say the least.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, we were doing all kinds of very athletic yoga and running and jumping into cold Swedish lakes and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
everything,
Uh-huh. Were there specific things that you got from the different people?
Well, yeah, I mean, just let's see, from Dave Sporny, I think just a lot of playing experience and basically kind of the Remington tradition in the trombone playing, I would say,
Uh-huh.
which is probably only meaningful to trombone players, but just make the best sound you can possibly make, do your basics, and try to be relaxed and make, it's like singing what you're
Hmm.
doing. So, and then D. Stewart was very had studied with Arnold Jacobs and was very, very influenced by Arnold Jacobs' direct line, you could say. And so I got a lot of that philosophy, which was fantastic. And let's see, developed a lot of good habits with him. And then I had Per Breivik. He was a much more European style teacher. and he had incredible ears, and he would just, pick out one of your 16th notes, in the middle of a scale passage, and Abbie, your A's a little sharp there, and you just kind
Uh-huh.
of go, ah,
Uh-huh.
so you really had to clean up your act with him, which was
Uh-huh.
fantastic. He's very, very precise. And it was, of course, lovely to be in New York in that atmosphere, and occasionally go to the Met and hear him play. And yeah, just that whole New York scene, just so the high professionality of it all
Hmm.
kind of helps you take yourself a little bit more seriously, you know. Yeah, and then let's see, Global Car was another kind of revelation because he was kind of from the French school and kind of had his own way of playing the trombone, which I'd never understood, but it worked for him really well. And he was, um, he was a composer as well, so he's really, really interesting person. And I got to play some of his pieces with him and some other really interesting trombone players from Europe for several years. And then Branimir. Branimir was great. I was already in the orchestra in the Munich Philharmonic, and I
Really?
just had never really focused on I never really focused on solo literature. So, Radomir was one of the early trombone soloists, and I'd heard him on the radio um, when I was in Munich, and I thought, who's that? It was just so musical and
Uh-huh.
such a wonderful sound, and kind of played more like an oboe player than a trombonist. And so, yeah, I studied with him in Cologne, and I would commute up there, every couple of weeks when I had free, and that was fabulous. And then Christian Lindbergh, yeah, I went to a couple of his boot camps up in northern Sweden or middle Sweden. In any case, it's very north up there. In the summers, of course, the sun never set, and
Right,
so
right.
so nor did it ever set on our trombone playing because it was very, very intense. And like I say, he had this yoga warm up that I sort of called the warm up from hell because it was very tough, and you did yoga in between every exercise. Every
Really? Wow.
yeah. So it was all took exactly 1 hour. So it was you completely timed to the second. So you just turned the metronome on, and an hour later you were done.
Boy, that's discipline.
Yes, it was. I did that for years. It was very, very good, very helpful.
How did you make it over to Europe the first time?
The first time, oh, let's see. Yeah, I got in the Spoleto Festival Orchestra. It was called the Festival of Two Worlds, dei due mondi.
Hmm.
And so I was at Charleston for a month, and then they flew you over to Spoleto for a month. And from there, see, when I was at Juilliard, I saw a little um, notice about an opening in Florence for first trombone, and I grabbed that thing and I took it down. I said, "That's my job."
Uh-huh.
Literally. And so I practiced while I was at the Spoleto Festival every chance I got, and went down there and took that audition and won it. That's a whole nother story.
Uh-huh.
Um, and and they said they were going to send me the contract in the mail, and everything was all set. And then a couple of weeks later, nothing happened, and I called, and they, said, "No, no, 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 nothing." They just kind of left me hanging, and and I and then I found out that actually they had another audition and taken somebody from Turin in the Royal
Mm.
Opera House for
Hmm.
first trombone. And so I was so disappointed, but William, my husband, said, "Well, why don't you just take his job? Go up and, audition for that." So I sent remember telegrams? I sent a telegram and said,
Yeah.
"Could I come audition for this job?" And they said yes. And so I went up there and played, basically for the conductor and a couple of other people. And silly me, took all 10 of my excerpt books, you know. So he started in volume 1 and, leafed through there and said, play this, play this. And, went through basically all 10 volumes.
Wow. Okay.
I guess he really wanted to be sure.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, I got that job. And then I found out 2 years later from the guy who had gotten my job in Florence.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, Abbie, but they I took, they actually asked me to audition, and what happened was," and he told me, he said that the orchestra manager called Philadelphia because, the general music director of Florence at that time was Riccardo Muti.
Really? Okay.
And they called him up in Philadelphia, and because he wasn't at the audition,
Mm-hmm.
and said, "Well, we found a first trombone player, and and by the way, it's a woman." And he said, "Oh, no, I don't want a woman. We have too many women in the orchestra already." So that was explained why I never heard anything.
So that's where it started, actually.
Yeah, yeah. But it kind of just, it was disappointing because, you kind of, that would have been such a fantastic job. But then I, of course, had gotten Munich. And so it wasn't sort of somewhat compensated.
You were 2 years in the opera in Torino? In
1 year.
Turin? 1 year.
1
Okay.
year,
Okay.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was it like playing in that orchestra? Did you sense that being a woman made you different, or were you just like a normal brass player there? Whatever that is.
Whatever that is.
That's like an oxymoron, I guess.
Well, I'll tell you, I felt very welcome, and they really appreciated me and very much respected me, and always they would come in. I would be practicing in one of the practice rooms at the opera, and then somebody knock on the door and say, "Can I come listen?"
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it happened quite a bit. They were
Uh-huh.
so wanting to learn, the
Mm-hmm.
especially the younger ones. And I always thought that was kind of pretty bizarre, but no, they were very, very, very kind, very welcoming, and it was fun, and it was, the operas was such that, there were at least 20-minute pauses in between the acts, more like a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the colleagues would go to the cafeteria or something, or to the bar and, drink or whatever a little bit. But I would go practice because it was fantastic little, sort of laser practice time. And so by the time I, auditioned for Munich, I was pretty well, prepared for that. But it was funny. We had, everybody, it was a purely Italian opera. I think I was the only foreigner in it. And they all knew all the arias of the Italian operas.
Uh-huh.
They would, these trumpet players would have, like a competition to see who could sing the best tenor aria. And they would just, just belt that out, with great
Uh-huh.
voices. And they knew all these arias by heart.
Wow.
And they'd kind of sit there, well, I think Tony won today. It's amazing. And it was funny because like the rehearsal where they didn't have the singers yet, they would just start singing. They'd stand up on their chairs and sing, the parts.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Who was your music director?
His name was, let me think. I remember because, oh God, he said at my audition, he was real Torinese. Turin people are very cool. They're not like, the typical warm Italian, effusive.
Mm-hmm.
They hardly move, and then they just sort of, have this
Uh-huh.
straight, kind of Italian. And he would just, after I would play an excerpt, he'd say, "Ottimo," and then I'd play another one, he'd say, "Ottimo." And I thought, and then at the end he said, "Ottimo." And I thought, what happened?
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't, and then I found out later it meant, kind of like optimal or something
Oh,
like that,
really?
Yeah, it
Uh-huh.
was a very positive thing, actually.
Yeah,
But because he was just completely stone-faced, I just assumed it was, not great.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So that was kind of interesting. Let me think if his name comes to me. Martinotti, I
Martin,
think.
okay, that sounds very Italian. Is it,
Yeah.
do you think the Italian style of playing, was it radically different from the American style of playing?
Back then, yes, I would say. I
Hmm.
would say, yeah. And also just the way they would just tear into Verdi or Puccini. I mean, I really think there was, it's kind of like when we do like Bernstein or something,
Hmm.
Copeland. It's just like,
Yeah,
oh well, it's kind of in your blood,
this is our music. Yeah, yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
So yeah, and it was interesting, like I remember there was they were making a big deal about we'd already been rehearsing and everything, but then there was this the beginning of the season, which was a big deal, and the conductor, I remember he had a frock coat on, like a 19th century frock coat on, like I don't know, like Abraham Lincoln would have worn or something. And well, that's what you did on the opening night of the opera, right? So it was very
That's great with the
very
tradition.
traditional. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. How did Munich impact your teaching in Trossingen? I mean, had you not had the experience in Munich, would you have taught much different than the way you teach now?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. You mean all the kind of the negative experiences? Did that make me teach differently, you think, or?
Yeah, and how and what you saw and how it influenced your life, how you think about music and everything.
Oh yes, for sure. I couldn't listen. I could not listen to a Bruckner symphony for years. They they were they were radioactive
Oh,
for me. I
uh,
mean, I just like it brought everything back. Certain pieces, like but mostly Bruckner was
mhm.
the worst, and certain Ravel
Yeah.
pieces. Yeah, that. But anyway, I got over that finally.
I was in Trossingen with you like about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I guess, and
Mm-hmm.
we went out afterwards and had dinner
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with some of the faculty members, with Wolfgang and Guggenberger and some
Mm-hmm.
other people, and the mentality there just seemed great and
It is.
happy, and yeah,
It
yeah.
is. Yes, it's wonderful.
Would you consider? I guess your experience in Munich would be the aberration, and what you have in Trossingen is normality in a way.
Yes, it was like when I got the job in Trossingen, and so there's a slight overlap where I was still finishing out my last year in the Munich
Uh-huh.
Philharmonic, but I had the job. It wasn't so long, but I was still living in Munich and commuting, and I felt like when I got to Trossingen, I felt like it was King's X. I don't know if you remember children's games. We called it King's X, was where you were safe and nobody could tag you.
Oh, okay,
You were
okay.
in
Uh-huh.
King's X. I don't know where
Uh-huh.
that came from. It's some children's tradition, but I felt it was that safe sanctuary. So
Uh-huh.
I was just like, it was just sigh of relief when I got there,
Uh-huh.
and I could just deal with these wonderful young people, that just really were enthusiastic about learning and playing and all. So, yeah, I mean, there was some getting my job there was had a little story too.
Uh-huh.
I auditioned there for the job, and I guess they thought I was the best candidate. And one of the jury members said, "Oh, but what's it going to be like to work with a woman trombone professor," or something like that. And the horn professor basically stood up and said, "If this were America, you'd be fired for saying something like that."
Really?
Yes.
Was the horn professor an American or?
Francis Sorval. He
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And so
Good for him.
his wife was a horn player, right? So
Uh-huh.
he got it, and he said that, and it's sort of like, whoa, they weren't, they just, that for them, that was normal to say stuff like that.
Yeah.
But still, There was actually the trumpet professor wanted to hear someone else that didn't even apply. I won't go into that. And then they had to come and do a special workshop, and then I had to do another workshop because he had done a workshop. So I had to do a workshop, and they put me in this room all day long, and I had to teach trombone. And occasionally somebody would come in and observe a little bit. And it was just like, oh, what is this? And then they finally gave me the job. So it's like I had to audition twice even for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you've been there. How many years have you been there now?
Oh, God. I don't know. I started in the fall of 92.
Wow. Okay.
It's been a while.
Really? 92? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
27, 20.
I think I started in Freiburg in 92, 93.
Really?
Yeah, so
you were there all that time?
A fair amount of time. Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
So, 93 I think it was for me. So, do you think we just have a couple minutes left, but do you think your teaching has changed over the years?
Oh, probably.
Much?
It sort of morphed almost because I pick up ideas, from everywhere and from all kinds of different genres, if you will. For sure. It's morphed, I'm sure.
I remember when we talked that one night, we talked about books. And I mean, it sounds to me like you're always reading new books and always exploring new ideas.
I've been influenced by, how to think like Leonardo da Vinci very much, and the 7 principles of Leonardo as extrapolated by Michael Gelb from his life and work. I find those just real gems. And I ended up reading tons of self-help books, and like Krishnamurti. I did Alexander Technique, which I thought was brilliant and so helpful. That helped me during all my struggles in the orchestra to stay, centered and calm. And yoga, I did a lot of yoga. I ran, I jogged, that kind of thing, and I think also just reading lofty literature is inspiring, and it kind of keeps you living in the world of the immortals, if you will,
As Hermann Hesse called them.
Is that what he said? Oh, beautiful. I read every Hesse book ever. Right?
Me.
I loved it.
Starting with Peter Kamenzian, I've read every book of his too.
Yeah.
But in Steppenwolf, that's what he calls the immortals.
Oh, really?
Like Mozart and
Council of the Immortals. Anyway, and I don't know what else I could say.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea is just to try and keep growing. Try to always be a student. Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, Abbie, this has been great. Thank you so much for spending time.
My
I really
pleasure.
Appreciate it with it. You're an inspiration.
I hope people, people get something out of what I babbled.
Yeah. Well, and we'll post some links for you also, your website, and because we didn't even talk about all the work you're doing in terms of the projects
theater
that you have.
Yeah.
Music theater and all of that.
And thank you so much. It's an honor to be on
Really
this.
great talking to you. So take care of yourself. We'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.